Hello and good day, everyone. $1 trillion. That's what US companies are wasting each year due to voluntary turnover, right? That number is astonishing. And corporate parenting is at the core of the problem. So today I'm responding to your questions about what is corporate parenting so you can start to shift to retain your top talent. Now, welcome everyone. I'm Christina Green, generational workforce consultant or generational translator and founder of Cardigan Careers. So let's go ahead and dive in. But who am I to tell you about corporate parenting, right? Well, I am a Gen X leader and I have spent over 20 years in healthcare navigating the minefields of generational conflict myself. And I've been on multiple sides of this evolving workplace, and it's changing no matter how you feel about it, right? This is a moving train and it is coming. As a leader, I have made a ton of mistakes. I am a recovering micromanager, right? I used to not delegate to my team because I didn't feel that I could trust them well enough for all of the details. I would double work, and that would cause me to burn out, burning that candle on both ends. I would be so focused on the minutia that I wouldn't be looking forward, and this actually stifled my own career development. And ultimately, all of that micromanagement just led to me losing some of the best people on my team, right? And making life a bit miserable for those who stuck around. But years ago, I ditched the corporate grind to help organizations and leaders just like you to navigate their own generational tensions. And I have found that most people are just not aware of how great of an impact the generational biases are having on their job satisfaction and ultimately their bottom line. Now, I've been called the generational whisperer or the generational translator because I understand the unspoken truths that keeps teams divided and not communicating. But today, I'm going to help you to learn how to identify corporate parenting so you can start building bridges within your team. Okay, so let's dive in. Now, what is corporate parenting, right? Corporate parenting is a leadership style where managers treat employees like children rather than capable professionals. Now, this could be, intentional or not, right? They use control and outdated authority dynamics and power imbalances to enforce compliance and obedience rather than fostering an environment of trust, autonomy, and growth, right? And I'm going to tell you right now, corporate parenting is what's killing your innovation. It's what's stifling your growth. It's what's delaying the career progression for yourself and your team. It's also fueling this toxic workplace that we've come to understand that most people are actually putting their hand up to. What we understand is that true leadership is about empowering your teams, right? It's about building a culture of trust and developing the talent with the future in mind. And we can't do that if we're constantly micromanaging them or treating them as if we are superior to them or an authority figure over them. Now, if we do all of this, if we do this the right way, all without belittling or dismissing individuals who really are the key to success, they are your succession plan. They are the team that you are pouring into. Now, let's get to some of the questions that I received since going live last week, introducing this concept of corporate parenting. Now, too often we lean on how things have always been done, and we perpetuate the norms in our language and our actions of an environment that might have molded us into who we are today, but are actually driving a wedge between the generations in the workforce. Now, this parent-child dynamic has greatly influenced the corporate parenting model because it was easy to adopt. It is normal, right? This top-down leadership is what most corporate environments are built on today, and they've been successful, right? That structure has served the success of our many industries today because control over process has produced these results, right? Because we understand that you can control the process, then you can control what the outcome looks like. But today, the values have shifted, and people are no longer willing to burn out for achievement, right? Burning the 40, 60, 80-hour weeks. People are just not willing to do that. So, models that prioritize authority and oversight, right? That micromanagement over extending autonomy and flexibility to their teams will be challenged as this workforce continues to shift into the hands of millennials and Gen Z. And I shared last time about the metrics are where we are today. Right now, much of the control, if you will, or executive positions or leadership positions are in the hands of Gen X and also to a little bit of the boomers. Now, that's going to shift over the next 10 years, where millennials and Gen Z are actually going to step into the majority of those leadership positions. So, micromanagement will not be tolerated. It won't be perpetuated any longer because employees are simply over this, right? Now, if you heard me talk about this before, you understand that how millennials and Gen Z have come to really push back on this concept of the toxic work environment, this corporate parenting that we're talking about, is because they have seen prior generations either create this or perpetuate it. They've seen what has been the effects on earlier generations who have ultimately burnt out, right? They've reached a point in their career where they are shifting, they're pivoting, they are simply just burnt out. And some have, quit and said, I would just rather, do Instacart or drive for Uber or minimize all of my expenses and just live off grid. Okay. So besides, we understand that micromanagement is just not leadership, right? It's parenting. It's how we lean in and help and guide and teach our children, but it is not how we are to lead our environments, our workplace any longer. But here's the good news. We can be the change simply by shifting from control to trust, right? Think of this analogy of how it is if you've ever taught a child how to ride a bike, right? You hold on, you hold the handlebars first, right? You help them to understand how to steer, to get the feeling for that. There's nothing wrong with that. And then over time, you gradually, to just holding the back of the seat. And then eventually, you ultimately let it go. You let go and let them, even if they're going to fall, you have to allow them to experience what that potential failure might feel like, as well as what the failure feels like, as well as the success. That's all part of the growth, right? So if we manage the what and not the how, right? What is the goal? What's the objective, right? State that and give them the strategy, but allow them to be able to take and step into, defining how they're going to get there, okay? And then leading in with guidance and removing barriers. That is the job of a leader, is to step in and to remove barriers that keep them from executing on the task, on the what, but the how is still managed by them, right? So when you do so, when you do these things, when you lean in with guidance and you remove those barriers, when you manage the what and not the how, when you shift from control to trust, just watch how quickly your team rises to the challenge and grows in their positions. All right, so now let's get to the next question. So if corporate parenting is so bad, why do some employees seem to expect it? Now, this is a great question. Some employees do expect it because it's all they've ever known, right? You heard me say before that most workplaces are really already established on this parent-child dynamic. And really, actually, most of them mirror this school structure where there's a start, there's an end time. You have to clock in, or if you're salary, you have certain times that you start, certain times that you take maybe breaks and lunches, and certainly an end time, right? So it provides that structure on how it is, the time commitment that you have for that work. You have to ask for permission if you can not attend a meeting, if you can have a day off, if you can have an extended period of time off, right? All of this requires some type of a permission or approval from your leader. And there are rules to follow, right? There are policies within every company and how it is that you engage in work, expectations maybe at the department level. There are a series of rules that we have to follow, much like we have in school. Now, and also too, we don't question authority. We essentially do as we're told, and in exchange for money, right? Now, so many expect this when entering the workforce because it's what they've experienced for the majority of their life. And when that model is part of the culture, no one is really going to question it because this is exactly what we've experienced as we're moving through life. So stepping into the workforce, that's expected. Continuing to move between employers, it's still expected because it's the same structure pretty much everywhere you go with different seasoning, right? But just because this might be expected doesn't mean that it's the best for them or for others, right? We have to challenge the thinking about what is actually creating this toxic environment. What are the elements that people are feeling the friction, the rub, right? No one wants to be monitored. They don't want to have their bathroom breaks and they're clocking in, and clocking out. They don't want to have any of that monitored, right? It feels like they're being controlled, if you will, to some extent. They don't want to be micromanaged. That is for sure. What they really want is clarity and understanding how the work that they're doing is contributing to a bigger picture, right? Clarity and direction as to how it is that they are to be successful in their roles. They want support when they run into challenges or they have questions, right? They want the freedom to do their job without feeling like they're being scrutinized at every corner, right? Now, while they may expect to have this structure, what they're really looking for is to have the flexibility to be able to move within a space, right? To not have everything predetermined on how it is that they are to execute on that role. Now, here is how we break the cycle. We don't feed the tell me what to do monster, right? Like, tell me what to do. Tell me how to execute on this thing. Instead, you ask the question of what do you think the next step should be, right? Allow them to work through that. This is part of that critical thinking. How are they going to step into their own growth if they're never given the opportunity to make decisions, right? To weigh in on what the how looks like. Now, instead of micromanaging, set clear expectations. Let them know this is what success looks like. And success essentially is what the finish line looks like, right? It's not the color of the banner at the finish line. It's not the time that they execute on, right? It's not the time that they get for the race. It's not the expression that they have on their face, right? It's not all of those details. It's to say finish looks like here is the point, right? Here is the result that we are expecting. Now, you understand, ask me questions if you have any about how it is that we're going to, about what it is that I'm looking for that ultimately we need on the other side of this execution. But it's not managing the how. All right. Now, instead of defaulting to the approval mode, right? Let me review everything, every step, every version, every next step, right? You create a culture where employees feel safe about making decisions, right? Especially if they are communicating within their team, communicating cross-functionally. Maybe if they are, if they're communicating with your customers, know that you have trained them. You've given them enough guidance to be able to support their ability to be able to make decisions on their own. People just want permission. They just want permission to step into their power. And that starts with you as their leader, giving them the space to do so. This is how you grow and develop your teams. So even when they are looking for that structure, they are looking for those predetermined measurements of success. Give them the flexibility to be able to grow in this space, right? To make sure that they have a future that they can see themselves in. And it's not a future that you created for them. It's one that they've created for themselves because they're familiar with taking these actions themselves. All right. Now, this next question, what is the difference between supporting my employees and accidentally parenting them? Now, first, I want you to give yourself a break because the line between supporting and parenting is paper thin, right? We all want to do the right thing by our teams because no one really wants to be a parent at work, right? If you are one in life, nobody wants to continue this, in the workspace, but it happens a lot. So here are some ways to recognize the difference, right? So support looks like providing resources, tools to helping them along, right? These are maybe templates, perhaps maybe they are prior examples of what has been demonstrated, what has been shared before, right? It is guidance on the what, not the how. It's stepping back and letting them figure it out, right? So that maybe there's a design element to something that they're doing, and you may have opinions about it, but withhold them. Let them come to an understanding as to what's important, right? Then what are the important elements to include on what it is that they're on what they're doing. So, but parenting looks more like constantly checking in with them to make sure they're doing it right. Right. So, constantly making sure that what they are doing is meeting your expectations. Right. So, constantly checking in. This is kind of like hovering. Right. And support looks like letting them control the pathway to the results. Right. Managing the how, trusting them to get there without your control, right? It's like giving them directions or giving them the endpoint. Here is where we're going to meet this day, this time. You can walk, you can run, you can bike, you can drive, you can fly, you can take a train. All of those things should be left up to them. That's the how, right? And parenting looks like requesting them to include you at every step for review and approval, right? I'll say this. I once knew someone who had their team CC them on every single email that they sent, even to one another, as well as cross-functionally, anyone within the organization. And this is just an extreme case of micromanagement, whether or not their intention was to truly micromanage their team or to stay fully involved because the team was remote. Either way, it was overkill. I can only imagine the volume of emails that they had in their inbox. All right. And support looks like asking questions rather than providing answers, right? To questions that they can work through. So instead of leading with the solution, you are leading with questions that are helping them to get to the answer, right? Parenting looks like solving every problem that comes that arises rather than allowing them to make decisions and troubleshoot, because they've got to think critically through these things, because this is how you develop leaders. They've got to think for themselves, to think through problems instead of waiting for someone, creating a dependency on you to provide the answer. So the difference between support and parenting, one builds confidence, right? Self-confidence and their ability to execute and their ability to make decisions and their ability to be able to know that they are qualified for taking those next steps into promotions, right, in their career. The other one, it breeds dependency, right? It makes them dependent on you, that you are always going to have the answer. You will always, every time that they get stuck, it's like they're on the side of the road with uh, they're on the side of the road with a flat tire, and you are always going to be there to help them fix it. No, they've got to learn how to do that themselves, right? How to use their resources to be able to do it themselves. Now, remember the saying, the quote, you teach a man to fish, he will never be hungry. But if we just give them the fish, they will become dependent and never learn how to provide for themselves. Okay, I see a question real quick. How do you recommend giving freedom without being too hands off where the employee has no direction? Oh, that's a great question. And forgive me if I missed that too long. Now, how you give them the structure. So this is, think of it kind of like an outline, right? If they've never done this or executed on this before, uh, give the direction, give the satisfactory level of instruction and guidance that they need in order that you believe that they would need in order to execute. Now it's kind of like giving them 20%, right? Of the full 100% is going to be, the rest of it is shared by them, right? An 80-20 rule. Give them 20% of what they need, right? A draft outline. This is, look at it like a book. You're going to give them the headers to all of the chapters, but you're not going to give them the subheaders for every single subtopic they're going to talk about within every chapter, right? You're not going to outline what the each main point will be and perhaps maybe their takeaway. That's not the thing. The goal is for them to write a book that has these headers, right? That is going to include information about these things. Now, the context and everything that they are pouring into that book is going to be essentially the how they define that. Now, when they have questions, and when you're giving the assignment, allow there to be time to be able to understand, one, make sure that they've understood what the assignment is, the direction. Are they feeling confident about taking next steps? And if they're not open about that, ask them the question. So now that we've explained what this initiative, this project, what this looks like, what questions do you have? Or what is the first step you're thinking to take, right? By doing that, it opens it up and lets them ask questions where they may not have thought to ask before. Give them an opportunity to say, listen, as you dive into this a bit more, you may have more questions. And as they come up, I want you to come back to me and just let me know. Now, when they come back, and if they have questions that are really specific about the how, and you know that they can come to that understanding themselves, ask them questions instead of just providing them with the solutions, right? Sometimes you need to make a connection and help them to understand that maybe this is a resource that they can reach out to. Maybe this is another point of consideration, right? And how it is they would approach. But use questions first to help get them to walk to their own understanding. Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Nicole. All right. Okay. I'll keep the chat open to make sure I don't miss any more of your questions, but thank you. Thank you for them. All right. Next. So here's this question. How do I deprogram, right? Deprogram myself from this old school management style I was taught. Now, first, I want you to say that there's not meant to be any language, or if you will, any attitude towards old school, right? I told you I am Gen X, and I have been raised on much of this, which is why I talk about this so much, is because this has been my experience as well. And I know we all have these shared experiences to make sure that we can feel that this is a safe space to talk about them. So, okay. So now we're all conditioned to believe that control equals leadership, right? If you don't manage things closely, things are going to fall apart, right? I put out a poll a couple of weeks ago that asked, what do you think when you hear someone, this typically in Gen X, that said, I'll just do it myself, right? And one of the responses was, well, if you want it done right. Well, listen, I'll raise my hand as Gen X. That has been something I have said, I have thought, I have believed, and it's not necessarily wrong. It's just probably not the spirit to how we define this path moving forward, right? So now thinking like this is precisely why people are actually leaving. It's one of the reasons that people are referring to the corporate environment, right? This corporate parenting environment as toxic. So we need to unlearn some of this nonsense together, okay? So I want you to know, just like we have learned this from our own experiences, there is a bridge that we can unlearn much of this behavior. Because what I want you to know and walk away from this talk is clearly understanding that every generation has a voice in the present and in the future. And I'm talking about every generation because there's value to the experiences of those who are further along in their career, as well as those who are just starting out and everywhere in between. Okay. All right. Now, how do we unlearn this? So, first, I want you to catch yourself in this corporate parenting mode, right? Because it's easy to exist there. It's easy to live there. When you feel the urge to, well, let me just check in, right? And check in and see that things are going right. I want you to pause. Always pause first before you go into solutioning, before you go into, let me just kind of put my hands and eyes and ears on these things, right? Pause first, and I want you to ask, do they actually need my input? Or am I just uncomfortable letting go? Now, this question, the second part of the question, right, is really more so intended to be a reflection, right? A self reflection and understanding on whether or not you are just trying to control the outcome, control the process and how they're getting there, or do you really believe that they need your input? And if so, I want you to figure out, is your input going to completely going to steer them? If someone is on the wrong path, right? You put them on the journey. They are supposed to be on the paved path, and somehow they're on the dirt path that is taking them completely south. You gotta get them back on track, right? That's not what this is explaining. This is making sure that getting out of that micromanagement mode where you are trying to get people back to, you're trying to help them understand critically how to move forward themselves, how to be critical thinkers, how to problem solve on their own and troubleshoot, right? So if it's just that you're uncomfortable letting go, then I want you to pause and I want you to rest on it, right? Don't take that action today. If it's still a burning desire for you the next day, then I want you to lead with questions, with open-ended questions first. All right. Now, next, I want you to start asking and not answering, right? So lead with I'll say this. So old school leadership is handing out answers, handing out directions, right? Barking orders. Modern leadership, right? Where we are today and where we're moving is guiding people to their own solutions. Because the way that you think to solve something doesn't have to align with the way that someone else on your team believes that things can be solved, right? It's managing the what, not the how. Okay. Now you do this by asking questions. When an employee asks you, "What should I do?" Right? Loaded question. They're looking for you to solve the problem, and as a natural problem solver, I will jump in and give them the answer every single time. This is not a multiple choice test, right? Think of it as an essay where it's an open-ended question. You actually are going to redirect them. You're going to flip it around and you're going to ask them, what do you think is the next best move? Put it back on them. They're trying to transfer it back to you because that is a level of comfort. And believe me, with the former question that we were asking about, employees expecting this structure, they're expecting their leaders to solve their problems, right? Big problems, yes. As leaders, we are to get in there and to do that. But when these are problems that they can manage, that they can solve, let them work through that. All right. Next, I want you to trust yourself and your team. Now, we can all think that we trust, right? I trust yourself as a leader, right? In your ability to lead, because we're constantly growing in these roles. Right? I want you to, letting go, it feels weird. It feels uncomfortable at first, but the more you do it, the more you recognize that this is actually better for everyone involved, including you, right? But micromanagement is not leadership. It's just a control issue. And listen, as I say, I am a recovering micromanager because I have to control everything. But once I started doing this, I freed up so much of my time, so much of my emotional and mental capacity to be able to execute on the things that are important for me, and then let my team take the rest. Right? So trust yourself as their leader, and trust that your team can execute. Remember, like, you hired them for a reason. right? They exist, they have been hired for a reason, whether you own your own business or whether or not you work for a large Fortune 500 company, it doesn't matter. These people exist in your space because they have been qualified to do the role that you have charged them to do. Okay. Now, remember, we're not here to raise our employees, right? We're here to empower them to potentially become leaders themselves. And leadership is not just a title, you know this, right? It is not about taking on the management of people. Leadership is a mindset, is how it is that you are approaching the work that you're doing and how you exist within that space with others. Are others looking to you to support them along, guide them along their journey, right? So leaders are built. Leaders are people who exist within your space. They could be people on your team who step in and help to pull the team together. They are maybe when a conversation during a meeting is going off track, they help to bring it back, right? So they help people to keep them engaged and ignited on the work that you're doing, the collaborative work that you're working together on. Okay. All right. Now, if any of this has struck nerve or perhaps maybe rang a bell, right? This resonates with you. It sounds like something you've experienced or are experienced, then it's time to chat, right? So, corporate parenting is a bad habit, and that's a hard one to kick. And I also, too, is one that can't continue. So, I want to help you through that because I don't want that for you and I don't want that for your team. So, if you're interested in having the next conversation, use the QR code on the screen and set up some time together because we can fix this together. This does not have to be your reality. All right. Now, next month, we're celebrating Women's History Month and kicking off a series that is exploring key moments in history where women have contributed greatly to the workplace. And if you want a masterclass on employee retention, on engagement, and breaking through barriers, then study the women of our history. So join me live each week beginning next Wednesday, March 5th, right here, because we're going to be diving in and talking through some really great women who have contributed. There's no way you can fit all of this into one masterclass. And so we're going to be honoring each generation, one every single week. And next week, we're starting with boomers. All right. Well, that is all for today. So thank you very much for your time and for your attention. Once again, I'm Christina Green, and it has been an honor to present to you today. And I look forward to connecting with you. Until next time, I'll see you then.